everyone. Glad to be here today. So as you saw, my name is Ina Kuvic, and I am the Director of Demand Strategy and Operationalization. So if it helps, I definitely call it ops, but let's talk about what that actually is. So when I say demand strategy, I'm talking about consumer demand. So a lot of my job is understanding what is the consumer demand for our products and why. And then the operationalization part is really, what do we actually do with that information? And the reason that that's part of my title is because I spent a lot of my time not just getting those insights, but making sure that all functions in the business have the insights that they need to do their job in line with our overall portfolio strategy. So as you see, a lot of what I do is about where do we play and how do we win. And I'm part of the transformation office, and I do work very closely with our insights function, but as you can see, I don't have insights in my title. So what I'm gonna talk to you guys about is what is our transformation journey and how are we using social listening to help us advance that. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about Pernod Ricard. We are the #2 spirits manufacturer in the world. As you can see on the page, we have some iconic brands like Jameson, like Absolut, and we have a lot of newer, younger, higher growing brands like Jefferson's, like Rabbit Hole, and hopefully for those of you who have been working for a while, you can see a lot of familiar brands on this page. A lot of what we do is about thinking, what are the moments that matter for our consumers and how do they engage with our products? We're gonna talk a bit about where this all started, what is our mission as Pernod Ricard, and how we embrace social listening. We're gonna talk about the role that it plays in our digital transformation, and I'm gonna share a few different case studies with you to help bring that to life. So we like to think of ourselves as the creators of conviviality. What does that really mean? It goes all the way back to our founder. And we know that when people connect, possibilities emerge and magic happens. And this is something that goes all the way back and is very much wired into the culture at Pernod Ricard. Now, we know that in order for us to create these magical moments, we need to understand what they are. And that is really where we begin. What motivates a consumer to choose our product for any particular occasion that they may have? That's where we need that insights and we need that data coming in quickly, at scale, and as real time as possible. Now, we also think about how do we take that into the future? And what does conviviality look like as we move forward? We have an ambitious transformation agenda, and it's all about being a conviviality platform. So it's not just about having the right product, but it's about the right product to the right consumer across multiple markets for every occasion, and I'll keep coming back to this occasion piece, and at the right price. And in order for us to really architect that, we need to have the right data sources informing not only what we do 5 years out, but what do we do today, what do we do in between that time, and how do we set ourselves up successfully? So let's talk a bit about our journey. Now, we focused on making sure that we have the right information in order to make our business decisions. So one of the things that we did is think about going from one time to real time. And I think a lot of you have probably seen these one-time large-scale studies that are really hard to replicate. What we focused on over the past couple of years is getting all of our insight sources to tell a consistent story to the business so that it's all about what is happening from a consumer lens, and we're getting that information early enough so that we do see some early signals. We also pushed towards a more predictive view, so we test a lot of our foundational studies for what are the actual predictive drivers, not just what is telling us what's happening, but how do we use that information to have a point of view on what happens next. And the next part is really about being wired in to core business processes. So what does that mean? Of course, we share insights with our marketing partners to help them inform their strategies. We have a large insights team that is very embedded into their marketing teams. A lot of what I do is work with functions outside of brand marketing. So I spend a lot of time with our finance organization, for example, and we look at the data that we have and we think about how do we use that to make recommendations around where we spend. I spend a lot of time with our marketing effectiveness team so that we can also see, are the insights that we have really delivering the value that we believe they're going to be delivering, and how do we optimize it based on multiple data sources. I also spent time with our media team, helping make sure that our creative agency partners understand our foundation so that by the time they get to briefings with the brands, they already understand our framework, what drives the decisions that we make, and why. So a lot of this wired in is not just about making sure that people understand the insights and buy into what are the results, but it's actually about being able to inform multiple different stakeholders in the business about why a few key facts should impact how they think about pricing strategy, or how they think about trade optimization, or how they think about the tactics that they work on in store. And by the time we do all three of these things, it is really about being a true partner with the functions. And a lot of the conversations typically happen about how do you get a seat at the table. I think on our side, we don't just think about having a seat at the table, we think about driving the agenda for the strategy of our business over the next several years and thinking about who needs to be at the table to make that happen. So really, as you can see, between these four things, we start by having the right data and the right analytics, but we spend a lot of time making sure that what we extract from that data and analytics is integrated across the entire business. So let's talk a little bit about social listening specifically, how we began, what we found. And what I have on these pages are a couple of challenges that are probably pretty familiar to a lot of people who've worked with social listening. And so, as you can see, data helped us understand what happened, but didn't really help us make a call on what do we do next? Is this really important? We saw trends was promising, but really difficult to scale, especially if you don't really know where you might want to place your bets. And teaching people to use these platforms was great when you had someone who was really excited about them, but at the same time, you were still missing that overall broad view that allows you to take a stake into what's happening next as opposed to just reporting on specific metrics. So really, when it comes down to it, we saw the promise, but we didn't know how to leverage it effectively and efficiently. And this is really all a challenge that we face not just with social listening, but probably resonates across the board in any platform. There's someone who believes in it, there's someone who sees the value, but how do you actually wire it all the way through so that you're not constantly selling people on why this matters, but people are just using this as a part of their day-to-day? So I'm going to tell you about the steps we took and then illustrate what that looks like for us. First, before we even thought about how do we use our tools, we refreshed our foundation. And we invested a lot of time in going back to the basics and made sure that we understood that we had the right tools. Now, when we refreshed our foundation, we then put a set of other tools in place to say, when do we look at this again? What are the things we need to refresh on a major level? What are the things that we can be refreshing on a minor level as we go? So no more gaps in ongoing information. Then we thought about how do we distribute data quicker. When we were at the beginning of the COVID crisis, there was a lot of demand for what are consumers thinking? What are consumers feeling? What do we think is going to happen next? And we had a super frequent cadence of reports that we published. So we maintained a lot of that as we moved out of immediate COVID, and we thought about, okay, what are the tools that the business has actually become pretty used to seeing? How do we scale these? How do we make them available? How do we train people to look for them so that they're not as resource intensive for us? But we got into the habit of getting insights out quickly so that people have them at the time that they need them. And we thought about, where does social listening fit in? And one of the things about social listening is that we know that there are different reasons why people post about the things that they post and what they allow other people to see. And that is something that always makes it a little bit challenging to say, hey, within social listening, I have this completely 100% view, but what we focused on is, where is it going to give us the best view? What are those moments that consumers are going to be excited about sharing? And who are these consumers that are going to be posting? And then we thought, who else is going to be posting? And that's where we focused a little bit on who's influencing those consumers and what is the trade saying about some of these trends that actually helps drive where consumers want to head next. And at the heart of it, we said, we don't need another platform, we need a strategic partner. And we need a strategic partner that works across our business cycle, that knows our key milestones, and that gives us the information we need in the format that we need it in order to give it to the people who are going to be using. And very practically, what that means is it might be 1 page, it might be 2 pages, it might be a piece of inspiration, but more often than not, what it means is we don't need a long report. So we did 5 things. We defined the scope and expectations, and I shared a little bit about that already, but really level setting what type of support we need and making sure that we have the right people on our account. We collaborated on the brief. We set out our goals and objectives for what we need delivered at the time that we need them delivered, making sure that when we are presenting to our business, whether it's about planning, whether it's about addressing a consumer need, that report is ready to go. Then we looked at amplifying what works, and I'll give you a couple of examples of that as we go. But one of the benefits of being a global company is that there's a lot of pockets of expertise. So we looked at what is happening at the global level that we want to be able to adopt for us. And now, a little bit later, we're on the reverse curve of that, where global partners are coming to us and saying, hey, you guys did this. We want to be able to scale this for our market as well. So it's been a nice opportunity for us to get to know other markets and get to know some of our other partners across the globe. We updated roles and responsibilities. So of course, hard to move forward if it's not clear who owns what and what they're accountable for. And we aligned with business milestones. As we go through these next couple of pages, I'm going to give you some examples of the work that we've done and how this lives in our organization. The first thing we did comes back to that social bias for good and thinking about who is posting about consumer occasions. We thought there has to be a community of people who are really incentivized to put out content that they know is going to resonate. We created tribes of bartenders with the intent of capturing the spirit of the conversation, pun intended. What are they saying? How are they talking to consumers? How are they driving traffic to the things that they're passionate about? And who is that resonating with? But also structure the data in a way that allows us to go in at any point in time and link that to our brands, to competitor brands, to make an informed decision. We use this information with our customer teams, not just our brand teams. And that is something that we have prepared in advance, and we've put that into our channel planning process. And what you can see is that we also codified some of our top cocktails across the industry, and it allows us to know where exactly the traffic is happening and what are the cocktails that people are talking about, and also why. At the same time, what we've done is we translate millions of conversations into very simple insights. And yes, it's great that I'm showing a whole bunch of graphs, but at the end of the day, our goal is to get to one simple insight and recommendation for action for our business. And having all of that structured easily allows us and our partners to spend time on delivering value as opposed to mining through a lot of data. And what you can see is what we get out of it is not just the quant. Of course, it's great to understand relative ranking and position, but what ends up being most important to us is what are people actually saying? What are their passion points? Because it is true that that passion points construct drives a lot of conversation, it can drive action, it's something that people can identify with. And those are the things that we do want to pick up on, and we don't want them to get lost in a sea of data. We also thought about those moments of conviviality. So how do we structure our data to help us understand consumer occasions? Going back to, we know that there are some occasions consumers are going to be really excited to post about. We know that there are some that they may not necessarily post about as often. We look at all of this and we have found a way to structure this data so that at any point in time, we can go in and find examples of what this might look like for a typical consumer, helping us augment quant research, because quant research does not always give you that easy view or maybe doesn't have a picture to come with it. We also said we're going to be looking at this to help inspire briefing processes. So maybe the goal is not always to get to a quantitative recommendation, but the goal is to pull out some salient examples that help someone orient themselves real quick about what is really happening at the heart of this moment. And I think that's one of the areas where social listening has really come in for us, is it's very quick to paint a picture for someone about what's happening at the heart of that emotion for a consumer that drove them to post something on the internet. And as we've done this, we've learned a lot about how we can refine it, and we've created something that's scalable. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we learned from what exists globally, but now we have the opportunity to scale some of the things that we're doing. This is the perfect example of something that can live for US data, but can also be applied to a global data set. And this is where we have some data, we can get into the weeds of what's happening, but we don't necessarily always start with, what is the volume? We look at what is the pace, what is the trend, are some times of the year particularly more meaningful? And then we dig into, okay, what does this mean for our business? Who on our side needs to know about this? Is this for marketing? Is this for channel teams? Is this for someone else altogether? And it is about democratizing and encouraging use. So we set some very clear expectations around what it means to be proficient. We evaluated our metrics for success. So who really needs to be good at this? Is the mark of success really that everyone logs in, or is the mark of success that we have a few key users who are empowered to go in, find the information that they need, and share it with the business at a time that's convenient for them? So we set up some very clear expectations around that, and we looked at what exists in the platform that didn't exist when we started that helps automate some of that. So from our side, what we've done is we've enabled people to be more successful by giving them tools like insights pages, and also freed them up to explore more on their own, because the things that drive them to go in are easily accessible. And we thought about, how do we bring trends to life? So instead of doing presentations that are only focused on social listening, what we tend to do is we bring that in to a lot of other topics. When we are investigating a business question, we make sure that we have the right social listening lens to bring into that. And when we're answering questions about what is happening with consumers as they emerge out of lockdown, what are the habits that stuck around? What are the habits that are changing? Alongside data, we also have some very real examples that we can pull in that helps everyone in the audience visualize exactly what we mean and help us drive the point home. So I think that that's it for all of my examples. Hopefully I did okay on time and gave us a little bit more time for some questions. Yeah,
Isn't she lovely? So good to have you before lunch. It was excellent. Anyone have questions for her? All right. I'm going to take you, and then she'll bring you the mic back there.
Hi, great presentation. I used to run a social listening company. One of the barriers we always had, and this is just curiosity at this point, that we had with working with alcoholic beverage companies with social listening data was that you could never prove that the people were 21 and over. how have you guys overcome that? I spoke to your company probably 4 years ago, and they wouldn't budge from a legal standpoint on that. It's great that you guys have moved forward, but just pure curiosity how you guys got over that.
Yeah. No, that's something that we take very seriously, and that's something that our global team has worked with our vendor to make sure that before we put anything in, we've met all of the safety and checks criteria. It's when I'm pulling reports specifically, which is probably a better way to answer your question, I always keep an eye on that in what I see. I can genuinely say I've not seen anything that for me has caused me to question that the safety protocols are working, but responsible drinking for us is probably the number one thing that we are always making sure that the content we publish does not drop the ball on.
Bill Soliker from Skim. 2 questions. One, are you available for consultation during the happy hour this afternoon?
I guess I'm going to say yes.
Okay. And secondly, during the pandemic and lockdown, I wanted to get better at mixology and found a great YouTube channel with a guy called Steve the Bartender. I'm just curious, to what extent do you see influencers like Steve playing a role in the whole social listening
Yes.
realm?
So one of the visions that we had for making sure that we have tribes done right and kicking off is because what we observed is there is a very clear pattern of influence in terms of different types of bartenders being relevant to different groups of people. So there's no necessarily one silver bullet, but we have been very keen to figure out who are the influencers across categories, across different types of occasions, and making sure that we have an eye on what are we seeing in social and passing that on to our team of bartenders as well. But I will say that during the pandemic, there of course has been a big change in how the bartender industry went about engaging with consumers and gave them a good opportunity to also build our platforms.
All right, we have time for 1 or 2 more. Okay, awesome.
My question is, our company, I'm here with ATCS, our company also provides social insights, and one of our biggest client works across different markets. And during the pandemic, their traditional research got basically stopped. And they turn into social insights for everything, like from marketing to product development through, suddenly we were supporting the entire organization. Have you gone through that process as well, and how social insights have impacted the mix between, if you have to decide what type of information you go to social insights or you go to traditional, what's the mix, what changed, how impacted?
So we do think about what is the balance of the types of research and tools that we need. And it is always a balance. It's not about what is our one solution, but I think where our team takes a hard look is how do we create one comprehensive story to the business? And so different types of research will give you different pieces of that story. And we really prioritize storytelling in a way that drives someone to action, as opposed to kind of starting with, okay, what is our landscape and our research mix, but more about what is going to move the needle for us to achieve our strategic objectives.
Awesome. And then we have our last question in the back from Michael.
Thanks. Michael Hussey from Stat Social, and a sort of a follow-up question to the previous one. My original question was, how do you engage with the traditional research teams? And maybe as a follow-up, given the previous question, the synthesizing of that story, is that being driven? Who's driving that? Is that the traditional team taking your insights, taking your reports, and bringing that to the CMO? Or can you sort of talk about the interaction between your team and the traditional research team? Thanks.
Yeah, so we generally drive that story for us as the owners of what is our strategy, how are we moving the needle on our objectives, and how do we achieve what our overall company goal is. That is a really big portion of our role. Now, what is the mix of tools and methods that we use? Because I will say it's also not just social versus traditional. It's about making sure that you have syndicated data. It's about making sure that your business intelligence team is looped in and finance is looped in so that we have a comprehensive view of the market. That is the piece that we own and bring to our leadership for recommendations.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ina. You have been amazing. Y'all give her one last hand clap.